I believe that this initiative between the Library District and RTC is impactful for the community. It allows people who don't have an opportunity to visit our physical libraries to actually still have access to the library while riding the bus, or if they're waiting at a bus shelter. Great partnership between two entities that serve the same customers.
Downloading the app and accessing the app, that's just a small bit that the library service offers. So we'd let them know, if you like this, make your way into the library, and you'll find there's even more amenities for you to take access and advantage of.
Happy GLR Week from Turn the Page STL, St. Louis's chapter of the
Welcome everyone. Apologies for that background noise for a second. I am excited to welcome you to GLR Week 2022. We will get started in just a second, but I did want to highlight our appreciation of our enterprise investors from 2020 to 2022. This is a partial listing, but again, we are very thankful and wanted to highlight these names. We will get started in just a second. Alrighty, welcome everyone again to GLR Week 2022. My name is Sierra Sanchez, and I will be behind the scenes helping to produce this conversation. I have just a few housekeeping details before we get started. First, we would love for you to introduce yourself, so please use the chat box at the bottom of the screen to share your name, city or state, and your organization. When responding, be sure to select both panelists and attendees so that we all know who is here. All attendees are in listen-only mode, but we encourage you to post any questions you may have in the Q&A box. All resources that you see shared as links in the chat box, in addition to a recording of the session, will be shared in a follow-up email to all webinar registrants. Additionally, we are so excited to announce that we are offering live ASL interpretation services, and you will see the interpreters on your screen for the duration of this session. We are also live streaming on our Facebook page and encourage you to follow along on the conversation on Twitter, LinkedIn, and Facebook using hashtag GLRweek and hashtag BrightSpotsSilverLinings. Finally, we'll be posting a brief poll at the end of the conversation and highly encourage you to respond, as it helps us with our commitment to continuous improvement. Again, it is my honor to welcome you to another plenary session, a part of GLR Week 2022, with the theme being Bright Spots and Silver Linings. Hopefully you have been able to join us the past 2 days for our plenary sessions. If not, we're happy you're here now and encourage you to join us tomorrow for a session on community coalition leading organizations. And Friday, there will be an invitation-only consultative conversation. In addition, while attending these conversations, we do encourage you to post on social media. We encourage you to follow us on Twitter at Reading by Third, on Facebook at Campaign for GLR, and to follow our recent posts and highlights on LinkedIn at Campaign for GLR. Again, please use hashtag GLR Week and hashtag BrightSpotsSilverLinings to follow along on the conversation. And now I hope you enjoy the webinar. Thank you so much, and thank you.
Thank you, Sierra, and welcome everyone. Thank you so much for joining us for day 3 of GLR Week as we continue the important conversation about digital equity. Those of you who've been joining in for these conversations for a while likely know that the Campaign for Grade Level Reading has been tracking this issue since early in 2020, hosting about a dozen sessions since then, exploring this issue, lifting up the importance of digital equity all the time, but especially during a pandemic when so many children lack access to in-person learning opportunities, celebrating the success and the progress that has been made over the past 2 years, and also lifting up and exploring the important roles that local, state, federal, and philanthropic leaders can play to advance digital equity. With the passage of the 2021 bipartisan infrastructure law and the $65 billion in funding that it's directing towards digital access and digital equity, we're excited to return again to this topic once again as a part of GLR Week, looking at it in particular through the funder perspective and lifting up the roles that the hundreds of state and local funders that are a part of the GLR network can play to maximize this opportunity and ensure that it benefits the kids and families who need it the most. So in today's conversation, we'll be exploring 3 local efforts that are being supported by local philanthropic funding. And we'll also hear from 2 groups that are working nationwide to advance digital equity. And to begin that conversation, I am incredibly honored to welcome and introduce our panelists for today. And our panel includes some familiar faces who have joined us and played important roles in previous sessions on digital equity, as well as some new faces. First, I'd like to welcome and introduce Anmei Chung, who is serving as the moderator for today's conversation. Anmei is the Director of Teaching, Learning, and Tech, and Strategic Advisor to the Education Policy Program at New America. She has extensive experience building networks and spearheading public-private partnerships and alliances as a part of efforts to bring equitable education and technology opportunities to all young people. While at the Mozilla Foundation, she forged partnerships and led the development of a global digital literacy initiative. And at the C.S. Mott Foundation, she led education grant making. Joining us as one of the panelists will provide a local perspective today is Sherry Corrier. Sherry currently serves as the manager of the Patterson Foundation's Digital Access for All initiative in the Suncoast region of Florida. Over the last 14 years, Sherry has served as a county administrator, deputy county administrator, and the first department director of Neighborhood Services Department for Manatee County. And we featured Digital Access for All initiative in GLR Week 2021, and so we're delighted that Sherry could come back to share some additional information about the work they've been doing since then. Welcome also to Shayna England from Los Angeles, California. Shayna is the founder and CEO of 42 Comms, a strategic advisory firm, and currently serves as the director of the Digital Equity Initiative at the California Community Foundation, where she brings deep expertise in political and strategic communications to bear on their efforts to expand broadband or affordable broadband connections throughout the community. Welcome back to Amina Fazlullah, who has joined us for several of our sessions on digital equity over the past couple of years. Amina serves as the Senior Director of Equity Policy at Common Sense's DC office, where she works on a range of issues, including privacy, expanding access to technology, and digital well-being. Prior to joining Common Sense, Amina was a tech policy fellow at Mozilla, where she worked to promote broadband connectivity in underserved communities around the world. Also joining us again is Jack Lynch. Jack is the Chief Operating Officer at Education Superhighway, a national nonprofit with a mission to close the digital divide for the 18 million households that have access to the internet, but just can't afford to connect. Jack began his career as a hardware engineer at Cisco Systems, but was driven to make a career change by a strong belief in the power of technology to create equitable opportunities for everyone. And finally, welcome to Ashley Pollard. Ashley is the K-12 Digital Access Program Manager for the City of Philadelphia. In this role, she leads PHL Connected, the city's initiative to provide free internet access to pre-K through grade 12 families. And she maintains the public and private partnerships that enable this initiative. Ashley started her career as a second grade teacher in Durham, North Carolina, and also served as co-chair of the K-12 work stream of the city's Digital Equity Coordinating Committee. Welcome. Thank you all for joining us today. I'm excited to learn from each of you, and now I'll pass the mic over to Anmei to lead us through this conversation.
Great. Thank you very much, Sarah, and thank you for setting us up so well for this conversation. I personally am looking forward to learning a lot from all these wonderful experts, and it's clear just based on your explanation that each of these organizations have done a lot to advance and continue to advance digital equity. So we want to take a few minutes to actually hear a little bit about the work that they're doing at the local, state, and national level, anywhere from just briefly sharing what you're doing to a major success. And I think we're going to start with Sherry. So Sherry, if you could kick us off and tell us about the Digital Access for All initiative led by the Patterson Foundation and I think the 4-county area you serve, that would be terrific. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much. It's such an honor to be here amongst a great panel. And for GLR Week 2022, the Patterson Foundation is located along the sun coast of Florida. And as you move on to the next slide, you can see the main focus of our Patterson Foundation is to strengthen people, organizations, and communities in a wide fostering of participation. We serve a 4-county area: Charlotte County, Desoto County, which are inland, and Manatee and Sarasota County, which are along the coast. We're also a member of the Suncoast Campaign for Grade Level Reading in all of those 4 counties. On our next slide, we talk a little bit more about the journey of our Digital Access for All initiative. We did a lot of exploration. We have over 165 curated reports in our resource library of this project. When we began to look at it, it started in June of 2020. Obviously, you all know around the time the COVID-19 was really full in force, and we were really concerned about our ALICE families, our asset limited, income constrained, and employed households, so that they did not have access. And so we asked ourselves these 2 main questions: who else cares in our region, and what are the possibilities? And as we studied those, we came up with some really important facts. And then the next slide, as you all know, and we don't have to tell you this, the myths and the facts about digital access, and especially in our area. But if you notice on the right, one of the main problems that one of our inland counties was having was no access computers and no access to the internet, and that was DeSoto County. And I'm going to focus on them throughout today's effort so you can hear about rural efforts in rural counties. But as we're looking at these particular issues, we have been working since the beginning of the project to increase the level of access and also to lower the digital divide for devices. In our next slide, it's just a summary of the activities that we have undertaken in this Digital Access for All and some of our milestones. We've really been at it hard. We have over 42 blogs that we posted digitally, and each day we have more. 23 different monthly newsletters that you can access on our website at thepattersonfoundation.org. 38 digital access articles in a collaboration with our local media and newspapers, 30 presentations across the nation and regional to organizations, not just presentations to main groups of people, but also to nonprofits and funders. We conducted over 50 interviews, and we continue to do that now, adding our National Philanthropy Scan, 10 Webersations, which you have another one coming up for our 11th tomorrow morning, and we have about 150 fully integrated digital access partners in that in that Webersation, and then 26 different presentations in our region, as we've picked up not only students and young children, but also an interest on behalf of seniors to become connected. And then again, our research that is in our reports that is on our website. So thank you so much. I look forward to the rest of this conversation.
Thank you, Sherry. That's a lot of work. I know we'll hear more about it soon. We're going to move to Philadelphia now. And Ashley, it would be wonderful if you could tell us a little bit about Philadelphia Connect Ed, which is an initiative being led by the city of Philadelphia.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. It's great to be here. So I primarily work on PHL Connected at the city of Philadelphia. And this was our pre-K through 12 household solution when the pandemic hit and when we realized that school was going to be fully remote for the upcoming 2021 school year. We quickly moved and sort of mobilized with our local education agencies, including the school district, over 60 different charter schools, our independence mission schools, and other parochial schools. We connected with ISPs to support us in this effort and craft this solution. And then we also engaged with our local philanthropy and the United Way of Greater Philadelphia and Southern New Jersey as our coordinating agent. So all of that brain power went into creating PHL Connected in 2020. We are still active today, so we're 2 years in, providing free internet to pre-K through 12 households via Comcast wired internet service, Internet Essentials, as well as through T-Mobile hotspots that are prioritized for students and families that might need a more mobile solution. These are students and families that might be living in shelters or cannot get a wired connection. Schools, our partner schools in this effort really took on the devices and distributing devices to every student, mostly Chromebooks, but some tablets, iPads. The United Way set up the 211 hotline, which is where families can call, they can get information about the program, they can do their eligibility screening. So that's sort of our one-stop shop for families. And then as the programs evolved, we've also really grown out our connections and partnerships with city and community organizations to support with targeted outreach, digital navigation, and digital skill building. But PHL Connected is just one part of a larger plan that the city of Philadelphia has endeavored to achieve. And so on the next slide, this demonstrates some of the data that we collected after year one of PHL Connected. We did a little bit of a needs assessment. We called it the Household Internet Assessment. We wanted to get a sense of the program impact, but also understand what other populations needed support in the city. The good news is that in 2021, we saw that broadband adoption was higher than it was in 2019, and that a primary driver of this adoption was discount offers, like PHL Connected, like low income or low cost discounts that are offered by ISPs. But what was concerning to us, or what we really are focused on, is that even despite these discount programs being in existence, that a third of Philadelphia households are subscription vulnerable. So without that discount program, they would not have internet access. So affordability really remains the key sort of barrier to broadband adoption. We also saw that lack of awareness of what is available was another barrier here. So that really set us up on the next slide for us to really craft our digital equity plan and formalize it and have that data-driven approach. So our digital equity plan was just released in January of this year. It is a 5-year digital equity plan focused on these 4 goals: devices, connectivity, training and workforce, and broader ecosystem. So, we know with PHL Connected and other populations that, again, affordability remains a barrier. Getting out the word about what's available to support them navigate that is really key, and sort of where my work comes into play here.
Terrific. Thank you so much, Ashley. And then we are moving to California. Shana, can you tell us more about the Digital Equity Initiative at the California Community Foundation?
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me. It's so fun to look at a participant list of more than 100 people interested in this issue. And I think there we are. So just a quick note about the California Community Foundation. We serve all of LA County, which is just kind of for context for folks, really, really big. Think of LA County as sort of like a state or even a country sometimes. We're 10 million people. We have 88 individual cities within the county. We have numerous school districts, hospital districts, multiple departments of public works and other kinds of public agencies. So it's really quite massive. The county budget alone is $36 billion, and that doesn't count any of the kind of other municipal budgets. So it's anything that we do in LA County, think of as happening at scale, and that includes the challenges. As part of that, CCF has made $1 billion commitment to the future of LA. We're in year 8 of that commitment and are at almost, this number is a little bit outdated, almost 900 million towards that. And we are really focused on systemic change to increase the quality of life for everyone who lives in LA County. And we are also deeply rooted in community. And it is our focus and our strong belief that the community and the closer we get to the ground, the better we're going to find solutions that work and really find the clues for where that systemic change is that we can support. Next slide, please. So the Digital Equity Initiative, we are a multi-year project of CCF. We started as a 3-year project. We've now grown into at least a 5-year project and looking probably to expand to 7 to 10 years. Our focus is on seeding and supporting a new digital equity movement in LA County that's rooted again in all of our very diverse communities. We have everything from deeply urban to deeply rural within the county. And we are focused, I think, a little bit differently than lots of folks are around the country. We're really focused on kind of power and capacity building to evolve the physical infrastructure of broadband. So we're on, if we think about the kind of 3 legs of the stool of digital equity, it's access, affordability, and literacy, and access and adoption and literacy. And we're really focused on that access piece and on the intersection between access and adoption, with the ultimate goal of fast, reliable, and affordable internet for every Angelino. Next slide, please. So the origins of this are CCF's core program areas. We're again in year 8 of the 10-year strategic plan that established our core program areas: education, health, immigration, housing, and civic engagement. And we got into the digital equity work late in 2020, had a big chunk of money that was endowed with the instruction to search and identify what was the systems change opportunity to help drive an equitable recovery from the pandemic and an equitable, quote unquote, new normal. And so engaged in a listening tour of grantees and partners and allied philanthropy across the county. And the words digital equity or digital divide were nowhere in our survey set. They were not in kind of our initial thinking. And honestly, that exact phraseology almost never came up in the conversations. But what did come up in every conversation was a story like our education partners who said, we initially kind of moved into gear to try to make sure that kind of low-income households had food because we assumed that the students who weren't eating at school anymore were going to need a replacement for that. And found very quickly that there's lots of motion on that, but what we were hearing from our families was really a sense of panic that their kids could not go to school because they could not get online, most of them because they didn't have a stable enough or high capacity enough broadband connection. And so shifted into digital, into kind of this work. Or in the immigration side, we heard, again, like immigration attorneys who were telling us that their clients were getting deported or were getting jail time for failure to appear in hearings when those hearings were online only and their clients didn't have access to a broadband or a device that would allow them to participate in those hearings. So those kinds of stories again and again that again generally didn't include the words digital divide or the words digital equity, but that's what they were describing. And so really thought of it as across all these program areas, progress towards equity was running into this brick wall of lack of access to fast, reliable, and affordable internet. Next slide, please. Thank you. So here's what it looks like in LA County, and I could have included 12 more maps that would show the same thing, that the maps that don't have internet, the areas that don't have internet access are the same areas that have low, medium household income, that are predominantly non-white. They also are the areas that are food deserts, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But that's what digital inequity looks like in LA County, and it probably looks familiar to anyone who works in equity issues anywhere in the country. Next slide, please. So we went about identifying root causes, and would love to chat with folks more about this, but digital redlining, there really is racism and discrimination built into the physical internet infrastructure. Looked at the kind of politics and policy that allowed that, and saw industry capture. And so really saw kind of industry voices were predominant and dominant within all the rooms where these decisions were being made. And then finally, what we're kind of shorthanding is narrative misdirection, where there's just not a lot of understanding of how the system works and where the opportunities for change are. So we built out program areas, including grant making, that kind of focuses on those three root causes. Next slide, please. And so here's where we are a year in. This is an almost complete map of 1 year in what our Digital Equity LA Coalition looks like. And this amazing group of organizations that works across a really wide range of sectors, providing services countywide, but also more often within small communities. And we've done everything from show up at California Public Utilities Commission hearing to community trainings to teach folks the actual kind of workings of the internet, to LA County board meetings, to this week we're doing meetings with legislators who are on recess, really coming together across all these sectors to advocate for broadband equity, especially in the context of all of the money that is coming down the pipe that could potentially close that gap. So looking forward to questions, and I think that's it for me. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Shana. And I want to move on to a couple of organizations that actually support the different kinds of communities we just heard about at the national level. So Jack, can you tell us what the Education Superhighway does on digital connections? Thank you.
Thanks, Emma. And it's a pleasure to be invited to be on this esteemed panel. We can go ahead and advance my presentation to slide 2 for a bit of quick history on Education Superhighway. So our original mission was to help bring high-speed broadband to all of the K-12 public schools across the country so that every student had the opportunity to benefit from technology in the classroom. And when we started this work in 2013, less than 10% of the K-12 students in the country had access to the FCC's recommended speeds to support digital learning. So we worked in partnership with all 50 states and school districts across the country to expand access to fiber infrastructure and dramatically lower the cost of broadband so that schools could afford more bandwidth for their budget. And by 2020, over 99% of students had access to those recommended speeds from the FCC in their classroom. But most importantly, this better access to broadband allowed more students to participate in digital learning and experience its benefits on instruction and learning. So Education Superhighway was actually planning on going out of business and shutting ourselves down in 2020, having completed our original mission, but the pandemic caused us to change those plans. So we can go to the next slide. And as many of us know, 55 million students during the pandemic were sent home to continue their educations online. And about 15 million of those students didn't have access to the internet at home, meaning that they were effectively locked out of their education. And I want to shout out my fellow panelist, Amina and Common Sense, for the outstanding research they did early on in the pandemic to help us understand the scope of this problem. But it wasn't just access to education that suffered as a result of the digital divide during the pandemic. The crisis made it clearer than ever that home broadband is essential for things like economic security and access to basic opportunity. So we can go to the next slide. And as we at Education Superhighway studied this problem and began to better understand the makeup of the digital divide and specifically the lack of home internet access, what we found was that the classic narrative around the digital divide being an infrastructure problem didn't actually tell the full picture. So while lack of infrastructure is preventing about 7 million households in the US from accessing the internet, it turns out that 2/3 of the digital divide, which affects about 18 million households, is a result of people not being able to afford the cost of internet service that is already available where they live. And about 4 million of those 18 million households have K-12 students. So we decided to focus on this problem, which we call the broadband affordability gap, as Education Superhighway's new mission. We can go to the next slide. So part of the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act was the creation of the $14 billion Affordable Connectivity Program, which provides eligible households with a $30 per month subsidy to cover the cost of their broadband bills. And this program gives us an incredible opportunity to address the broadband affordability gap. But just providing the money is only going to get us part of the way to the solution. So some of the challenges that we've been seeing with the ACP program have been around really low awareness, as we saw in Philadelphia, and a difficult enrollment process that individuals really struggle to complete. So to date, only about 22% of the eligible households across the country have enrolled in the ACP. And we've been working with communities across the country, including big cities, small towns, and everything in between, to pilot different strategies for how these communities can leverage trusted institutions and technology tools to overcome those challenges with awareness and enrollment and dramatically increase the ACP participation rate. So next slide. And what we've also found is that the local digital divide ecosystem plays a critical role in ensuring that the ACP and the other Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act programs are able to reach the households that need the support. So we've developed a toolkit of best practices for how local leaders, including funders, can effectively convene and activate community organizations, local institutions, and ISPs to increase your community's ACP participation rate and close your digital divide. And I'll end my introduction with a very quick plug. Education Superhighway is offering pro bono project management support to a select number of pilot communities that are deploying this ACP adoption toolkit. So if that's something you're interested in having your community be a part of, please reach out to me. And my contact information is on the next slide, or the final slide. And with that, I can turn it back to you, Anne.
Great, thank you very much, Jack. Appreciate that. Amina, you're up next to talk about what Common Sense Media is doing around these efforts.
Thank you. So Common Sense has been engaged in sort of trying to understand the scope and the scale of the K-12 digital divide. Our expertise lies in understanding how technology impacts families and children, and also in the educational context. And so at the start of the pandemic, we did, as Jack mentioned, and partnered with us on our second report, we tried to embark on actually putting some details to understanding the K-12 digital divide. So how many teachers? We found about 400,000 teachers were in the digital divide, and about 15 to 16 million students. And I'd note that these numbers are persistent. I've gotten that question a number of times. Okay, where do we stand now? And I think what these numbers tell us is, the scope and the scale of the problem and what policymakers should expect to build towards, right? So whatever programs you build and whatever philanthropy is supporting, this is an ongoing need that's going to need to be addressed. And so having long-term solutions in place to be able to handle this number, about 15 to 16 million students throughout their K-12 career, and about 400,000 teachers, to make sure everybody is actually equipped to participate in innovations around education and take advantage of technology. Next slide. By doing that report, we were able to go to policymakers and really give them a sense of, what this looks like in their state. And, the bad news was that even in the best supported states, 1 in 4 students still did not have adequate connections to the internet or device. This meant that we were able to actually gather a lot of support to actually get funds to address issues related to the K-12 digital divide and the larger issue of the digital divide. So, we were able to take a lot of our research and our findings, speak to federal policymakers, get them on board so they understood that this was a true issue within their state, and then actually activate them to set aside funding, which I think we've seen actually occur, which we're really excited for. Next slide. In part, I think what motivated a lot of funders was that they were able to make the connection between sort of the value in the investment. So, if they make these investments, which were not little, I mean, we were suggesting, billions of dollars in investments annually, what would they be able to see as return? And what we were able to connect was that there would be a $22 to $33 billion annual loss in GDP if we left our cohort of students disconnected. And this is a pretty conservative number, I'm pretty comfortable in saying, because there are a lot of other additional public costs when you have a student who's left in the digital divide. Next slide. Also being able to get people to understand the impact, the disproportionate impacts on rural communities, Black and Latinx and Native American households. These were all important things to highlight to policymakers so that they understood this true scope and impact of the digital divide and could fashion their policy responses in a way that actually started to address some of the underlying issues. Next slide. And, most importantly, we really wanted to put details on what you needed to support. This slide is a little bit out of date. Even now, this is from about a year or two ago. We found that if you wanted to have multiple users in the household, using internet and experiencing a robust interaction with technology, you wanted to have at least 210. That bottom number is really the number that's most important for the killer app that we've discovered throughout the pandemic, which is what we're doing right now, having a real-time face-to-face conversation. This is most important in the educational context, especially now that we're shifting into an environment where kids are in school during the day. They're all going home at the same time. Their parents may be home, their siblings will be home. The pressure that's put on their internet service is going to be pretty great. Understanding that tutoring to deal with learning loss is coming online, and it's getting very difficult to be able to get in-person tutoring because there is a staffing shortage. Being able to expand your reach in terms of tutors using technology is something that's super important. But the value of that, I think, depends on the quality of service. So again, quality of service dictates the success of your educational support or tool that you're trying to put in place. And you can get away with slower speeds, but we tried to put a fine point on this that, you would experience disruptions. And when you're talking about like an 8-year-old or a 10-year-old experiencing a disruption, you've probably lost them for the hour. So that session is pretty much done. So it's really important that you've got really high quality service that's going to be uninterrupted. Next slide. So as you all know, we've got this incredible opportunity in front of us. There's legislation passed in Congress, and it gives us an opportunity to really close the digital divide. The federal government is investing incredible amounts of money, but the work is not done yet. There's a lot of hand-holding that needs to be done as the money flows to the states to ensure that the money is actually being used in order to close the problems that we have surfaced. So making sure that there's continuing support for connectivity for students and devices so that we can actually innovate education in a way that allows educational leaders to be able to rely on a level of connectivity within their school community so that they know when they start to train teachers and invest in products and set up digital curriculum, that their students, in fact, will have long-term access to the technology that they need. And I'm going to save the rest of the slides for later where we get into some of the specifics of the ACP work that we're doing.
Thank you, Amina. That's terrific. So we are now going to move to a panel conversation. I've asked the panelists to all turn your videos on for this next part. And the first question I have for the panelists is directed at Amina and Sherry, actually. So with the passage of the 2021 bipartisan infrastructure law, there's obviously been a huge infusion of money and a lot of it going towards advancing digital equity. When you think about what these funds can do to either enhance, scale, or sustain, what do you think the digital equity itself, where do you think the greatest potential is on the things that you're focused on? And we'll start with Amina.
Yeah, actually, you could probably go to the next slide. So, one of the programs that we are really committed to, and I think you heard some others talking about this as well, is the Affordable Connectivity Program, which offers, the first of its kind benefit for families to be able to afford internet service. There are a few reasons why it's really important to make sure this program is really utilized and that people know about it. But, the first is, this is brand new. So, you want to make sure people actually know this resource exists. There's a lot of information already initially from the emergency broadband benefit that there are a lot of fits and starts with getting the word out. And so there's an incredible opportunity for funders to actually help boost that. So this is, I think, a really important moment in terms of just awareness building. The next piece of it is making sure people actually sign up. If you can go to the next slide. So, I see this as actually maybe one more past this one. Oh, well, maybe it's not on here. Never mind. The next piece of it, I think, is making sure that folks have access to enrollment support. So real people to walk them through signing up to the program. Again, this is all in order to make sure that the program is successful. If the program is successful in terms of uptake, we'll be able to see it actually stand stand up to another maybe funding infusion. $15 billion or so seems like a lot, but eventually it will get drawn down. And so it's really important that we show, actual uptake of the program. So I think that's a really important moment. The second thing I would just say is there's a, policy advocacy moment here. States are making plans for how they're going to use their funds. There's going to be a lot of folks in industry that are going to be meeting up with state policymakers as well. And they've typically been the ones to be able to dictate how all broadband monies are used. It's an incredible moment for local advocates, whether you're in the digital inclusion space or anything else that, rides on top of digital inclusion. So, immigration and housing and education and healthcare. If you care about these issues, speak to your broadband office now and tell them what you need as they're filling out these plans and as they're making these commitments to the federal government, because you can help shape the use of these dollars.
Okay. Sherry.
Thank you. Well, I'm just going to piggyback on what Amina said. If you go to the next slide, I think it's just really important one more time to see the amazing impact that this unprecedented amount of funds is coming forward from the Bipartisan Infrastructure Act, and in how it relates to our particular area on the Sun Coast of Florida. We have about 1.2 million people in the 4-county region that we cover. And in looking at those, as also was mentioned, we run from a very affluent area all the way to an agricultural area and all of those things in between. In each one of these areas, though, what our role in our fostering of widespread participation here for the Patterson Foundation and our Digital Access Initiative is to make sure that we're bringing people together. And Amina mentioned it. I mean, we have been working on bringing folks together and understanding the magnitude of their opportunity for a little over a year now, as we've researched for 2 years. And now we have the opportunity to have local communities, both city, county government, education, business, nonprofits, all work together to strive for trying to reach some of these funds. So if you move to the next slide, you'll see that we also are focusing in on some local participation. So in the state of Florida, the State Office of Broadband is putting together their strategic plan. Our local communities wanted to make sure that they are a part of that planning and reaching out to stakeholders. And so what we're trying to help do here, and all of you can also do in your communities, is to share their surveys, to share their stakeholder groups. They're having meetings and they're putting together their plans so that the state that you're in has an opportunity to apply for the funds and bring those locally to benefit each community in the way in which they want to see it done. In this particular instance, there's a resident survey. There is also a business survey, and those are both done in the languages needed for our area, and people have the ability to participate. especially in DeSoto County, where we talked before, is about 38,000 people, and the school system there is in real need of a boost for technology. We also, if you move to the next slide, have been supporting the Affordable Connectivity Program and the benefits that it's bring by sponsoring the FCC and some initiatives with bringing the FCC into our community and hosting some events on how to enroll people. And if you jump to our next slide, because we've covered the ACP program a couple times, and I know we're going to hear more about digital navigators, but we have an amazing team of consultants with our Digital Access for All initiative and a special training program that's been created for cohorts in our area, 6 nonprofits, over 20 digital navigators trained. And the interesting thing that we've recently found out is that we have the ability to help convene hybrid events where we're actually on site with the digital navigators and individuals coming in to sign up, carrying out additional responsibilities. And I would just remind everyone to think about, if we were not even able to be on this Zoom today and hear all of this great information, there are hundreds of thousands of people in your area that still do not have access to those 3 essential elements, which is on the last slide, and just a quick reminder of what our focus is with connectivity, skills support, and devices. And I think we're at the point where we're really finding out that while the focus for connectivity is going strong, having devices available and having the skills to use the devices are on the forefront of where the focus needs to be. Thanks.
Sheena, Jack, and Ashley, what is what do you think is the greatest potential for these funds?
So I think that these essential elements here that Sherry just presented are exactly what we're thinking about in Philadelphia. So PHL Connected, I think, was our first major shift to providing subsidized internet for households in need. And we are at the moment thinking about how we continue this campaign towards subsidized internet through ACP. So as Jack mentioned, the awareness is really key. So we need to continue to push on outreach. Our digital navigators have been signing folks up for ACP. We want to continue that and really build that. And then on the device front, we've tried a couple of pilots in Philadelphia with getting refurbished and recycled devices to households in need. Less than 80% of households in Philadelphia had a working large screen device. And so cost, again, affordability is one of the main reasons why they don't have it. And so we've piloted some recycling, refurbishing efforts, but we would love to be able to do some large scale purchases, bulk purchases of devices for distribution. And then on the skills piece, we do have a set of public computing centers in Philadelphia. That was one of our earlier initiatives as well, that actually predated PHL Connected. They were shut down during the pandemic, but are sort of being reimagined right now. And so we would love to be able to expand those and continue to offer that support. As well as the digital skills classes that can take place in those locations. So I think we have, little pilots here and there, and we have some smaller scale efforts that we really want to ramp up, and we see these funds as opportunities for that.
Jack or Sheena, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, I always feel like I come in a little bit as a Debbie Downer on this, but we are obviously super supportive of the ACP and of ensuring that people get access to resources that they need. I think what we've also seen, though, and we've been documenting this, is that in our communities, in the census tracts that are the highest poverty or the most likely to have people who could benefit from that subsidy, we have our incumbent ISPs have actually raised the prices of the service. So what you can get for $40 in, say, Beverly Hills, I think everyone, I'm aging myself, but everyone knows what 90210 stands for, right? There is nobody who benefits from the ACP in 90210. You can get from our monopoly incumbent provider in LA County, which is here, it's Charter Spectrum. You can get a 500 megabits per second service for $40 a month. If you go 30 minutes in LA traffic to some of our highest poverty census tracts, that saved 500 megabit per second service, costs $70. And so we, like, in terms of being able to like subsidy our way out of this problem, especially given that the way that these subsidy programs run is it's taxpayer dollars directly to private companies with really very little requirement around what they do with it. We're going to continue to have these gaps. And so I think that kind of to Amina's point, the policy and advocacy component, and really for funders to support that data gathering, that storytelling, and that engagement at the policy level to ensure that as we're spending really significant amounts of money to help drive adoption of these programs and hopefully kind of refunding of these programs, since the ACP looks like it might run out as soon as 18 months from now, that we're also building that back end to ensure that it actually does what it's meant to do. And then the second thing on that is the opportunity that we see in the infrastructure dollars is actually building competitive options and building municipal options and allowing health districts and school districts and communities themselves to create systems that serve the community rather than a kind of investor driven bottom line, which is what all of our incumbent ISPs are publicly traded companies that ultimately have a responsibility to maximize profits for shareholders. And that's not saying anything badly about them. It's just to say that their primary purpose is not equitable, fast, reliable, and affordable internet. It's profit maximization. And so there's real opportunity in these dollars to spend them in ways that can create systems that are intended to deliver equitable service of what is a modern utility, as opposed to continue to serve a profit bottom line.
Thank you.
And I'll just jump in with a few quick thoughts. I think the ACP, which is a big focus of Education Superhighway, has been well covered by my fellow panelists, and don't disagree with any of the challenges you just mentioned, Shayna. Another area, though, that we're also focusing on is an opportunity that comes out of the BEAD program, which is a different part of the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act. And we call this program our apartment Wi-Fi program, but we found that 4 million out of the 18 million households that we've identified as being part of this broadband affordability gap live in multifamily housing or apartment buildings. And in some cities, disconnected households in apartment buildings make up over a third of the digital divide. So there are actually connectivity solutions similar to the types of Wi-Fi networks you find in a hotel or even you could say a coffee shop or an airport that provide way better access than some of the commercial options right now at significantly lower costs. But if the affordable housing sector has struggled to adopt these solutions due to a lack of knowledge about their existence and also a lack of financing to cover the upfront costs to deploy these networks. So we're actually working with cities like Oakland, California, Charlotte, North Carolina, Boston, and Dallas to help affordable housing operators access public dollars to install these types of networks. And IIJA has a $42 billion program, that's what BEAD is, or Broadband Equity Access and Deployment, that can fund these types of projects. So we think that this is a really good solution in multifamily housing that can help address maybe a quarter to a third of the digital divide in cities all across the country.
Thank you. Okay, next question. And this is your opportunity to share with the funders who are listening advice. And I have to say, as a former funder, this was probably where I learned the most, was listening to what the grantees and funders had to say about this. But what sort of advice do you have, or cautions might you want to lift up and share in terms of, you know, timelines or how funding is utilized, et cetera, for how to leverage their funding to figure out how best to utilize these billions of dollars? So who would like to share some advice?
I can start, if that's okay.
Great, perfect.
So I would just say there are a few things, but like the first piece of advice is, and I'll say this again, just to make sure the policy work is not done yet. I think, you know, when you see big money flow out of the federal government, there's sort of this like collective like sigh of like, okay, we got the money and now it's just going to happen, right? But, you know, I think in some ways now, instead of focusing on one entity, say Congress or NTIA or Treasury or FCC. That's not one entity really, but now we're focusing on all 50 states and territories. So it's much more of an uphill battle, making sure that those dollars are shepherded out in the right way that actually meets the well-documented problem that we're all talking about. So I think I just want to put a fine point on it. There's a real true opportunity to engage, and the federal the policymakers at the federal level recognize that and require that. So BEAD funding that Jack just talked about, the Digital Equity Act funding, all of this, even the Treasury dollars, all of it incorporates language that is really looking for stakeholder input. But it's hard for stakeholders, small nonprofits, even national nonprofits, to participate in each one of these states or even in the state that they're in. So giving them support to be able to do that work, whether it's research, storytelling, or even just participating in the comment process, I think that's really welcome. And it's a short term. I mean, I think we have an opportunity to really truly engage over the next few years. So, for the next 5 years, if we can really support all of our on the ground partners to actually engage in the process and shepherd this and bird dog it, I think we can see some really successful outcomes. We've already seen at Common Sense at states efforts to either slow down the use of the money, divert the money, potentially leave money on the table, by either through state legislative efforts or like some really, really technical efforts that would just take up precious time and staff resources and make it harder for there to be good outcomes in terms of how states use these federal dollars. So there's a real danger as the money moves to the state to be able to make sure that, we've got, the best use of it. The other piece I'll sort of note is that there's an opportunity to maximize your existing investments. So take advantage of a program like the ACP, which, is an opportunity to really raise awareness and partner with the digital navigators or the other digital inclusion projects that you're already working on, lift them up through connecting the dots for your community to the ACP. That's one project that we're working on is trying to maximize awareness for the ACP, connect the dots to local digital navigators, enrollment specialists in a community, and then make sure that once you get connected to the ACP, you've got ongoing support for digital inclusion support. So training and digital citizenship support and, a real local resource that you can go back to with any other questions, because we know just connectivity and a device is not enough to get a family up and running necessarily.
You mean it. Others, advice for funders.
Would plus on everything Amina just said. And would also, I posted a link to this in the chat, but there are a lot of, I think, creative ways that funders can support that work, even if you are a funder who maybe doesn't support advocacy work directly. But we put together and are co-leading with, launched with 3 aligned funders across the state of California, a pooled fund that we are using to grant out to create technical assistance opportunities for CBOs and local governments to engage at, in our case, it's the California Broadband Council that is going to be leading the kind of community engagement work around this BEAD planning that a couple of folks have talked about. It's not obvious how to engage in that process. It is, there are open comment process, there are closed meetings, there are open meetings, there are requirements to put something in a comment box instead of in the chat. None of this is easy. And so we've created a pooled fund that supports technical assistance for small nonprofits and in small local governments and school districts, et cetera, to engage in that. And that's one thing that we've seen very quickly really amplify and accelerate the number of those kinds of organizations that are participating in these processes to make sure that equity is part of the conversation, and that those kind of community solutions are baked into how those dollars are going to get spent over time. And then the other thing I would say is that, and I think somewhere in the chat, maybe way up, and I hope somebody posts this in the questions, but there are a really wide range of potential solutions here. I think what Jack described in terms of the public housing piece is something that we've seen in LA County that's really important. There are also a lot of really good kind of municipal and public, private sorts of networks that make sense that are all fundable right now, depending, as long as you live in a state that doesn't explicitly prohibit municipal solutions, which 18 states do. But if you don't, then all the federal money actually is allowable for those kinds of solutions. And so funders can support this, creating the space for contemplating those kinds of different solutions. And maybe there's something that would work that is different than just continuing to throw money at AT&T or Verizon or whoever else that kind of presently operates. And so I think funders really have an important role in creating and funding the spaces for those kinds of creative conversations. And on the kind of challenge side, have to do it really quickly, because at least for the first set of money, we have like 2 years essentially to get that done. So I think that funders who can move quickly and who can create that and play in that like systems change platform space have a really, really important role to play right now.
Yeah, I'm going to piggyback on that. That funders, we're currently working on a national philanthropy scan, and we've talked to a lot of people, but some of the folks on the call here we haven't talked to yet. So we are going to follow up and do that. However, a lot of the things that we're seeing are in the local area. How can funders align with digital transformation? And one of the big things we're recently noticing, of course, is that organizations that help the consumer are not necessarily prepared for the digital transformation themselves. So nonprofit agencies that work with the consumer, they don't have a plan for how they're going to move through their own updates. So these are some things locally that can be done. But again, listening to everyone, it's really focusing on continuing to raise awareness of the needs of continuing to stay on top of the digital access issue. One thing I'd mention that's rather new to help us do that and to work locally here is that we're starting a telehealth and teletherapy research project to see just exactly how many people in the group of folks that we're dealing with have access to those services. And I think, again, it'll show another divide in just exactly how many people have access. So I'd add those things on top of what's already been mentioned.
One thing maybe to add is, I think complements everything that the group has shared, is that at a local level, the work's being done, and it has been done for some years now. Certainly, this is an unprecedented amount of funds and opportunity for us to take advantage of. But my advice would be to really get down on the ground and get a sense of what's been happening, which community orgs have been in this space. It could be small scale pilot sort of projects that have been going on, but they're there. And so I would really encourage that engagement with the folks on the ground who've been doing this work.
And again, well covered by everyone, but I'll just say, I think a great role for funders right now is to support local communities in being able to articulate their needs, right? And articulate the things that are working and help them to advocate to their state, that's where they need the support, because as everyone's mentioned, we're in a very crucial planning period right now that's going to last from around now to maybe this time next year or so. And funders need to help uplift kind of the community voices and send a clear message to the state planners of like what the needs are and what the solutions are that are going to work.
Great, that's terrific advice based on a lot of experience, I can tell. So another question related to funding is since this is a funder to funder conversation, in your role as either a funder or working with funders, are there any lessons learned right now that you all have already observed that you think would be important for folks to know as they start to figure out what kinds of roles that they could form with funders, current or future?
Is maybe specific to projects or?
It doesn't have to be specific to projects or otherwise. So like, what are some of the lessons learned?
Well, I mean, we're just engaging in it's been a bit of it like an iterative process, but we're engaging on this issue from like a few different I guess pathways, you could say. So I talked initially about research and how research was coupled with advocacy. Now our advocacy work is simultaneously happening as we are trying to do some implementation and awareness work, as well as updating like our digital inclusion materials. So a lot of this stuff is happening simultaneously. And I think one of the things that I would just sort of note to funders is that, sometimes a lot of the pieces like overlap. Instead of just saying like, okay, just because you're doing advocacy, you're going to be in this advocacy bucket. And just because you're, working on implementation of say awareness for ACP, you're going to be in this, other sort of programmatic bucket. A lot of it actually overlaps. And the reason to be sort of open to that is because there's like a force multiplier effect. Like if you've got really great advocacy and a little bit of proof of concept that's also been supported by programmatic funds for implementation, then you might be able to get the state to unlock funds that will boost and help you scale what you're doing, so that a little bit of support that you got initially from philanthropy can really grow. Also you can being supportive of partnerships across organizations, so that they're collaborative and not competitive, I think is really important. We're launching an ACP outreach and awareness campaign. We think our specialty is helping on that awareness side with making sure the advertising actually reaches the audience, making sure that we've got the right messaging in place. But we're partnering with organizations on the ground, like in Phoenix right now, it's ASU, to make sure that they're standing up the enrollment support, the real human support that's going to be on the ground and supporting with digital navigators. Supplementing that, we're helping with training and then also with digital inclusion resources. So there's a great partnership and a synergy that's produced by being able to do that. And, if you've got existing investments in digital navigators, you'll be able to really lift them up as a long-term resource to anybody that's ACP eligible, if you're able to connect the dots for like an awareness campaign. So there's a lot of benefits to that type of like cross-collaborative partnership.
Yeah, I would say as a former funder, I think that the power that funders can have or influence is convening, right? And the ability to bring people together to actually work across these different things and for people to share and work across, different sectors that you may not have had otherwise. Which I think, Amina, is what you were really referring to, is that ability to do that. Others.
Yeah, I'd add right onto that yeah, it's convening and coordinating is a really important role for funders to play. So we had an experience recently where we learned that one of our funders was also funding a separate organization to provide an identical service to states that we were providing. And it wasn't intentional. It wasn't like they said, okay, we're going to see which one does a better job. It was purely due to a lack of communication and coordination. And, I'm happy to report that now that we've realized this, the funder has been super helpful in connecting us to the other organization and facilitating a conversation so that we're now working together and rowing in the same direction. But it would have been even better if we'd caught this sooner. So coordination is no small task. I think Sherry's digital access initiative includes something like over 150 individuals and organizations. So there's a lot of people to get on the same page, and someone's got to do that work, and it's super important. And I think funders are in a great place to do it. So that's, I think, an important takeaway here.
I think yes to all of that. And also, I think one of our biggest lessons learned was just the amount of really like basic education and democratizing information that's necessary. So we found that we had a number of community organizations, even digital equity organizations, that were engaged in digital navigator work or device work, that when it came to how does this all work together, when we say the internet. What do we mean? Or we're hearing a lot about fiber. What does that mean? And just even those kind of basics that a lot of organizations sort of stepped in and then quickly stepped out as the jargon and kind of technical details became kind of overwhelming. And so we've, as a funder, in that kind of coordination and convening role, have begun doing quite a bit of community education across all kinds of levels, policymakers, CBO, supporting train the trainer models in community, supporting promotoras and educating them as they're going door to door and kind of describing why this house maybe has a connection and the house across the street doesn't, and being able to literally kind of look up at the poles and the wires that do and don't go to those locations has been just wildly important and a little bit of a surprise to us about how much of that really needed to get done and how deeply into the weeds that work needed to happen.
And another reminder for funders, lessons learned here is that, up until 2020, only 0.04% of overall philanthropy dollars were spent on digital access. So if any funder thinks they've really spent a lot or there's a lot of money already coming in, that's not true. So it's okay to get yourself into the action of this, because obviously it needs to be a sustainable effort. It can't be something where there's a drop in the bucket and then everything moves along. So, anywhere that they can get on board with seeing the alignment in their mission and addressing the convening has been brought up, this is a huge role that they'll continue to play for years to come.
I'll also add that I think that this is also an opportunity and a unique time for funders to support creativity and innovation. I think that, PHL Connected was an example of that. We pulled it together from scratch and just quickly mobilized and convened and collaborated with our funder groups and others. But it was, we were building the plane as we flew it, and it was relatively successful. And I think that this period of time as we're planning, as we're organizing and getting ready and gearing up for those dollars is a great time, I think, to test other solutions and to get things going, to demonstrate a proof of concept so that when the dollars are here, you can continue, you can, just pick up where you left off.
Yeah, I can't second that more. That's a really great point, because it's just there's a little bit of time right now to be able to do that proof of concept work, and you want to have that in hand when you're looking at the DEA funds or whatever's left over from BEAD, or if you even want to make a stab, well, that's short term, but a stab at Treasury funding. And so I think this is a really great moment to take advantage of, because the funds that are on the table going forward are going to be much, much larger. And so you really want to support, your best ideas and support innovation as well in this moment.
And that's a great segue to my next question. And then we will open it up for Q&A to all the participants. So please, as our panelists are answering this next question, add your questions into the Q&A section. So the next question is clearly there's a lot to be done, right? Even with the existing work, but thinking 5-10 years out, in terms of the innovation, what else needs to be done to ensure digital equity for children and families and all? Like, what are some of the things that you all, are already seeing that are on the horizon that have to be addressed like now in order to really take full advantage of it? And does any of it have to do with like DEI at all? Because that's been also a big conversation that's been infused in the last couple of years.
Well, I'll start off because I know everyone else has probably done a little bit more work in DEI, but let me just say, from the standpoint of working in a very focused 4-county area, what we've seen needs to be done is, well, we're bringing in the families of the students and the children. The children we're worried about, but not forgetting about everyone else in the family, and doing some surveying of our Suncoast Campaign for Grade Level Reading, This Book is Cool initiative last summer, and we're going to repeat that when this program is done, is that, families are sharing devices. They're sharing time. They don't have quality time. Their skill set is, from one end of the spectrum to another, and it's generational now. And so we have finally gotten to the point where seniors are accepting that this is really here to stay. It's not going to go away. We're going to be online. We're going to be needing to use it. So I think one of the things our team would like to continue to say is that, they really leave no stone unturned. Work with anyone and everyone that's possible, that's willing and able, and bring on the devices and bring on the skills training, which is going to be the most important issue over the next year or so as the funds are distributed. And so I would start off there and then turn it back over to the rest of the panel.
I think building in this kind of sustainability. So I do think that, and many folks have mentioned it in the comments, and I think it's definitely true, is that this is, even if we get all of the infrastructure spending exactly right, and even if we do that in a way that addresses the affordability issues with or without kind of ongoing subsidies, the reality is that this is intricately linked with kind of systemic drivers of poverty and all kinds of other inequities. And so in the same way that kind of none of us as funders, I don't think, approach any of the other program areas that we look at as like, oh, okay, we're going to like find that solution and then we're out of that program area. We don't have to fund health anymore. But I think we need to be transitioning into thinking about digital equity as similar to that. And we're sort of thinking about it as, look, we think about electricity, we think about water, we think about the kind of basic utilities of what's needed to participate in modern society. And high-speed internet is one of those things. And so kind of thinking long-term, we need to be putting in place right now what it's going to look like to continue to engage on this set of issues for 10 years, for 20 years, for as long as we think we're going to need to be addressing kind of more broadly issues of racism, discrimination, and poverty.
Yeah, I'd add that the long-term sort of nature of the support and sustainability is really important. I think it's also important not just to lift up the individuals that are in the digital divide that you're supporting, but also if you are doing work with any institutions that serve those communities and serve those individuals, to be able to work with them to incorporate digital equity thinking and planning and strategy into their work. So, I think already we've seen, like, in the educational context, there's, much more thinking around digital equity than maybe there was prior to the pandemic. Back in 2019, we did some research where we found that teachers were starting to avoid assigning homework that required technology because they knew that the digital divide was had an impact on their students. And it really didn't matter if it was half the students or just 2 students. So we were seeing this sort of distortion that was going sort of up the chain where, if you had something, if you had the digital divide in a household of 1 student, you'd have a teacher who was like, well, even if we are well connected in the classroom, got laptops, have training, et cetera, we're just going to kind of like hold off on using technology. So making sure institutions understand the impact on their ability to innovate, their ability to use on-the-shelf technology, their ability to take advantage of cost savings that come from technology use, or even enhance services to a community that's had poor outcomes in the past, say like related to healthcare, if you wanted to be able to expand and enhance healthcare services into a community that's been unserved or underserved. All of these things have a nexus with technology and digital inclusion. Some of that's laden in like sort of infrastructure, but there are layers on top of it, which are ongoing related to digital equity and inclusion, making sure there's training and comfort, security, all of that in using technology so that you can really take advantage of those innovations.
I'm jumping in because I believe something, of course, a digital equity webinar has to have some technical difficulties, and it looks like we might have lost Anne as our moderator. She looks like her connection might have dropped. So are there any other panelists that would like to respond to this question around kind of the what's next piece of work where you actions and opportunities moving forward? If not, we can jump to some of the questions we've gotten from attendees.
I'll just jump in to say that I think what we've got in front of us this whole planning period is a great opportunity to restate the point that even though we've done so much great work to get here, now's not the time to let up. I think there was several other panelists have said that now, but if anything, now's the time to dig in harder. And we might not get another opportunity in our lifetimes to close this digital divide like the opportunity we have in front of us. So let's not waste it. Again, while philanthropy can't provide on its own the scaled sustainable funding to close the digital divide that the government's able to provide, it's critical for philanthropy to fund the work to develop tested and proven strategies so that we try to do what Shana said and spend all 65 billion of these dollars as effectively as possible.
Great. Always important and helpful to make that point again and again and again to make sure that we truly do leverage these dollars. So we've had some comments in the chat and questions in the Q&A box about the importance of that digital navigation piece. Connectivity is critical and missing in so many communities, and the devices are critical and also missing in many households. But even if you have those two pieces, many people still can't truly achieve digital access. So, we've touched on it a little bit throughout this conversation, but is there anything more that folks would like to share about the importance of scaling and sustaining that digital navigation piece and that critical support so that folks really have the assistance and the support to fully leverage the connectivity and the devices when we get that to them?
I'm happy to jump in a little bit on digital inclusion. Common Sense has been developing digital citizenship materials for many years now. Our footprint is now in 89% of Title I schools. I think something like over 90% of, over 90%+ of Title I schools, and a little less when we were talking about all K-12 public schools. So there's definitely appetite for digital inclusion programming. I think there's an understanding among some institutions of its importance and relationship, but it's something that you have to re-up. Our first iteration of our curriculum feels outdated now, right? And it had to be re-upped. And when you have technology changing at the pace that it is, you've got to be able to continue to support users that are new to technology with actual training materials. That also means that you've got to retrain the trainers. This is truly something that needs to have a long-standing commitment so that you can, what you're offering your community that has traditionally been underserved or unserved and has been in the digital divide, that you're actually bringing them up to speed with their more resource cohort. And so, we want to make sure that, you've got trainers up to date, training materials up to date, and then ongoing resources that people can actually connect to through trusted channels.
Yeah, I'll agree. I'll agree in that as well. I'm sorry. I'll just quickly say, I think some additional things that we found, again, working in some very interesting one-on-one situations in groups with people, is that while they may be comfortable reaching out and getting connected, they certainly don't know how to use their device. It stops them in their tracks. They need help. They need an abundance of people in the networking in the community, not only to support the consumer, but digital navigators coming together and making sure that they continue to have the most important information. Cybersecurity is another big issue for a lot of our people, being afraid to access a lot of the programs that might be helping them be available to them because they've either had a bad experience or they're scared or nervous to provide their information. So updating your training materials to include those types of things, very important.
I think that this is another place where kind of keeping in mind the interconnectivity and the need for some sustainable systemic approaches is really important. So I'm posting a link to actually a piece of legislation that we are working on along with Common Sense in California and Next Gen California that would create what's being called a California Connect Core. Which has already been kind of being funded in a pilot sort of way, but it would create a kind of permanent program that would be run through the community colleges, would have a workforce development component, because it would be like a certification through our community colleges to create this kind of workforce that can do ongoing digital literacy, digital navigating. And also, I think someone has posted in the comments the kind of technical support. How do you do that in an ongoing way? And so it brings together a bunch of pieces of the system in a way that can be funded in a sustainable way, can have kind of accountability and direct outcomes, and that works in kind of every community in a way that is most aligned with that community's needs. And so it's a good example of something that as funders, we can fund a pilot of that, and then connecting back to the policy and advocacy work isn't done. There's real opportunity to create some of these much more durable programs in this moment.
I'll just flag that the evaluation survey that Sierra mentioned in the opening of this session just popped up on your screen. So we would just encourage everyone who's joining us today to take just a couple of quick moments to share your thoughts and feedback on today's session with us through that. And we'll continue the conversation. And I see Anne-May, you're back. Would you like to pick up and share a question?
I am
from
so
the Q&A?
sorry. Of course.
Wow.
I lost my connection. That's the way these things work. Are you all at the Q&A part? Okay,
yes.
So I actually don't have access to those questions anymore. So you will have to ask them, because when you start over again, the chat starts anew. So I think you're going to have to ask those questions, Sarah.
Okay, great. Well, so we've gotten a question from an anonymous attendee saying that some of the panelists have referenced sustainability, but no one has addressed ongoing tech support. Funders may not be excited about that element, but it's essential. My organization is distributing free laptops and initial digital navigation services to more than 5,000 low-income households, but are concerned we don't have the resources to provide the tech support. So I guess this is kind of continuing what we were just talking about, about the ongoing tech support. And so the laptops will be abandoned if someone can't afford tech services. So I don't know if there's anything additional to share to that. I think we might have covered it.
I mean, other than saying, yeah, like tech support, IT support should be included in your thinking around digital inclusion programming, right? So it's, there's digital citizenships or trust and safety and understanding how to operate online. There's, digital sort of traditional digital training to get you up to speed on, say, various applications. There's also, tech support, which is just the nuts and bolts of being able to deal with, finicky devices, which we all understand can happen, and making sure that, something simple doesn't turn a device that's perfectly usable into a brick. So, making sure all those pieces are ongoing is important.
Can I tack on a addendum to that and ask, where do folks get this support? Because one of the things we are finding out at New America is that there are not enough people who are qualified to train and actually give the kind of support that you're talking about. And so what do we do about that?
Yeah, so that's a really great point. And not trying to sound pessimistic either, but I don't know if we're ever going to have a philanthropically funded tech support line that can give everyone all the free tech support they need for everything, right? This is going to be a cost that's an ongoing cost for solutions. And so, for example, the networks we've been installing in apartment buildings, the way we've been addressing this in part is, on the technology side, and try to make sure we're putting in solutions that don't break very often. Right. So you can actually plan for this and try to mitigate some of it by just saying, let's use more reliable approaches in our interventions. Right. Maybe if there's a computer for $50, but it breaks every other day, that's not a very good solution compared to the $75 computer that's going to have far less issues. So I think there's thoughts of that nature that need to be incorporated into all of this. But it's probably going to be hard, if not impossible, to completely eliminate the need for like human-supported tech support. But we can try to lower those costs, minimize those needs, and make everything a little more sustainable in doing that.
I love the idea of baking it into your sort of initial purchases, right? So like making sure you're buying something that's like not with a tendency not to break or not as complicated to fix. But one thing I would say is to be prepared that some of the institutions that normally get relied upon will likely have to expand to deal with this. So, in the educational context, during the pandemic and even after, schools have their own sort of tech support for students. That's like sort of blossomed and expanded and has become something that parents are using as well, in part because schools are recognizing the value of having parents supported in their use of technology so that they can engage on parent-facing platforms and actually be more connected to teachers and the community as a whole, and that results in better educational outcomes, but also because that's where people turn. So I think, again, making sure that we're realistic, the funders are realistic about, the kind of pressures that are going to be placed on community organizations and also trusted institutions in the community so that, when they do get that pressure, they do have some support for the work that they're doing.
I really think it's important that as funder communities, and especially since so many funders are really quite influential in their communities and in their states, that funders take the role that they can and should have in advocating for sustainable systemic investment in these things. So I think Jack is totally right. We're never going to get to a place where there's enough philanthropy to support an ongoing tech support core, or even enough philanthropy support to ensure that like all of the libraries that are kind of de facto acting as digital navigator hubs can staff up to do that. The only way that happens is if it becomes part of the kind of ongoing funding of those public anchor institutions. And the only way that's going to happen is if there is kind of advocacy and political support for that. And I think the funding community is in a really good position to be able to do seed funding, to be able to do pilot funding, and then to be able to speak from a place of kind of respect and expertise, and again, influence, and use that influence to help kind of create some systemic solutions in this way.
There's another piece that I think I hesitated to mention, but I think it, like listening to you, Sheena, I should include is, again, policy advocacy for the larger industry, right? Like, so, making sure that, there are consumer protections, for everybody that is using telecommunication services, and that there are expectations for, maybe multiple languages, understanding of the existing federal public programs that are out there and resources so that it doesn't go into a black hole or upselling. If you have those consumer protections in place, you can actually utilize your industry options a lot better. And you don't necessarily need to cobble together a nonprofit or philanthropy only, or even a government only solution, because you can actually trust and utilize your industry in a way that actually serves these more vulnerable communities. So pushing for greater consumer protections and policies that actually support this from the much bigger chunk that is driven by industry is also important.
And I would say, like, basically what you both are saying is that it's about leveraging what limited funds you have as a private funder to grow the public dollars. If you can do that and think about it that way, it's an incredible investment of a small amount of money to grow those public dollars and supports.
Well,
so
that
we're at time, Sarah.
I think we are at our 90 minutes. I could listen to you all talk for another 90 minutes and still not get enough. But this has been incredible. I mean, there has been a little bit of Debbie Downer and pessimism, but also so much like opportunities for action and investment, smart investments and actions that funders and their partners can take. Really appreciate all of you for taking the time to share these insights with us. Thank you to Amina Fazlullah, Shayna England, Jack Lynch, Sherry Courier, Ashley Pollard, and to our amazing moderator who was able to come back in after technology got in her way, on Mei Sheng. Thank you all for joining us today. Thank you to all of you, our attendees, for joining us as well. I hope you will continue to join us for additional sessions as a part of GLR Week. I've just dropped links in the chat box to join us for our state events. You can find out more at there, as well as our one additional publicly accessible plenary session that's happening tomorrow at 3. And then we've got some more sessions coming up as a part of GLR Learning Tuesdays. Next week at Tuesday, we'll have a session in partnership with the Overdeck Family Foundation looking at out-of-school STEM digital initiatives. So how we can use this digital access to support kids in learning about STEM topics. And then during the month of August, we'll be kind of taking a little bit of a break. We'll be lifting up and resharing previous sessions each Tuesday at 3 p.m. Eastern time, high demand sessions that are designed to help inform efforts getting ready to go back to school in the fall. Hope you'll join us for those. And then quickly, if you can stick around for another about 1 minute time, we're going to share one more video about some incredible work happening in communities. Actually, this one is Suncoast in Florida. So just a quick bright spot about the incredible work that libraries are doing to support kids and families. But thank you all.
Hello, my name is Beth Duda. I'm the director of the Suncoast Campaign for Grade Level Reading, working with the Patterson Foundation on the Suncoast of Florida. And today, I would like to recognize one of our tremendous community partners, Linda Waters, the head librarian at Desoto County Public Library. Linda, from the very inception of the campaign in Desoto County, has been a tremendous ally, bringing great ideas and tremendous enthusiasm to the work. She and her staff were early adopters of our Suncoast Remake Learning Days initiative, hosting various events at the library where children and families could learn together side by side, reinforcing the concept that learning happens everywhere. She and her staff have been instrumental in helping us to distribute books during our This Book is Cool summer reading initiative. She's been at the center of bringing a mobile library to her rural community and has started a Give One, Take One little library throughout the county. She's also been a partner in our Digital Access for All initiative, making sure that digital knowledge and digital literacy is spread throughout the county. Linda, thank you so much for everything you do. You are truly making a difference.
Another example of digital access for all. Thank you all again. Hope you have a great rest of your day.